This video is intended to guide you through the process of creating a small project. When you get to this point, you should have already listed all of your variables, written your pseudocode, and your code out handwritten on a piece of paper. Once you get to this stage, you're ready now to code the program into your project. To create a project, you simply go to the File menu, New Project. Once you open this window up, be careful to make sure that Visual Basic is the one selected. In some of the labs, or maybe even at home, Visual C# or Visual C++ may be the default project. You do not want that. You want Visual Basic. So click on it and make sure Windows Form Application is also selected. Down here in this part, you want to make sure that your project is saved either to your flash drive or the desktop. I suggest saving it to the desktop because the program will run more efficiently on the desktop. So to do that, you simply click on that Browse button, click on the desktop, and select that particular folder. Once you do that, create your project name. Now, for most of your projects and labs, I will give you the names that I want for the project and the lab. What I will want is your class code, your last name, and then whatever the project name might be. Before you click OK, make sure these two boxes here are unselected. If they are selected, they can cause problems. So unselect these boxes and click OK. Now, once you do that, the project will load and give you this window that we should be familiar with. If you do not see this window, go over here to form.vb, double click on it, and it will open up the window. I've enlarged the window because this is where I'm going to create my interface. I should create my interface after I have my code written, and with this interface I'm going to put the code into a clickable button. So I'm going to start by adding some of the controls that I need for this program. I'm going to need a button. I can drag it on here. I'm going to need two text boxes, so I can double click and get two text boxes. I need a list box. I need 3 labels, and that's about it. So I'm going to take one of these labels up here and put it there to put my name in there. That's my output window. I'm going to put next to this label, and notice the labels are label 2 and label 1 and label 3. It really doesn't matter which order they're in, because for the labels we're not even going to name them. We're going to change the content of the label, but we will not name the label. So I'm going to put my button here, and then I'll set about changing the properties of the labels. I want to make sure this is alphabetically sorted. And then for this label, I'm going to go in and put, again, my class code and my name and whatever the project might be. And for this label here, I'm going to say this is width. This label, I will call it length. And now that I have all my labels set, these are the objects that I'm not going to name. The other objects I will name. So I'm going to name this text box just what I called it in my program with the prefix txt. So txt width. I will call this one txt length. I will name my list box always LST results. And of course my button, I will call it BTN calc. Now for my button, I also want to put a caption on there. So I'm going to click on the button, go down to the caption, the text part of it, and I'll just have it say calculate. Click on it and it's there. Now that I have my interface set up the way I want to set it up, I want to now get into the coding part. In order for me to code, I need to get into a different tab. That tab is not shown up here now. So a few ways I can get into it is to double click on the button. I can right click anywhere on the form and go to view code, or I can choose from the menu to go to view code. View code from the menu. I do not want to double click anywhere else on here to get to the code. If I do that, I can cause problems or later for my project. So I'm going to double click here, and it gives me a button click subroutine. So this is important. The first time I get in here, I always want to double click on the button because that's going to create that subroutine for me. If I don't do that, I will not get a subroutine the first time I go to view code. So I'll have to go back, double click on the button to create that. There are other ways to create this subroutine, but that's the easiest way. Once I have created it, I then want to start typing in my program. It is important that you put your code in between this subroutine. If you put your code outside of here, outside here, or below here, your code will not execute. So all of the code, including your declaration section and everything, must go in between the subroutine's header and the end sub. So I would type in dim, and for the sake of time, I am going to just paste code in here. I've made a few mistakes in this code. Just to talk again about the debugging process. The first mistake is length is not what I declared as a variable name. So I have to be consistent and call this length. I see here I have txt.width, and that is also not correct. So I'm going to create that error. For the first couple of programs, you will simply just use other program samples and templates to try to figure out what these syntax errors mean. In this one right here, I left out my multiplication symbol, and finally, if I look carefully right here, I am missing the ampersand. If you have syntax errors in your program and you attempt to run it, the program will not execute. In this case, you'll get what's called a build error. Whenever you see there's a build error, always click no. There's a tendency to click yes. If you click yes, it will run the previous version of that program. This may be during the process where the program was running correctly before you added the code that created the error. And in that case, you will not notice the error because you will be running a previous version. By clicking no, the errors will then show up in the screen down here, and you can go about debugging those errors either again by looking at common code or double clicking on it, and it will take you to the error, and then you can try to figure it out from there. So before I run this program, I'm going to actually change and make a little logical error right there. Okay, the program is ready to run. I will then click on the start button. I can also hit F5 to run this program. Once I do that, the program is now in its executable phase. It's running. So I can type in my width and my length, click on the calc button, and get a result. And I look at the area, and I know the area should be 50, and it's saying that it's 15. So there is something wrong here. I'm going to close up my box, and in another video I'm going to talk more about debugging. But what I'm going to do real quickly here is show you how quickly I can use a runtime debugger to figure out what's going on. I'm going to click right out here in the margin and create something called a breakpoint. This will be again explained in detail. What happens with the breakpoint is after I run the program will stop at this particular point and let me view the contents of the variables. So I'll click start. I'll enter my values in again. I'll click calculate, and now my program has halted right on this particular statement. I see down here that length is 10, width is 5, and area has nothing in it yet, and neither does perimeter, wherever it might be. We haven't even reached perimeter yet, so it's not showing down in this box. Okay, to move to the next line of code, I have several options. These options again will be explained in another video. One option is to simply step over this statement to the next statement. So if I click that, watch the arrow right here, it now moves to the next line. Now when I look at the contents of my variable area, I see that it's 15 and not the value that I thought it would be. So I know there's something wrong with this statement here. Again, this is a very simple program, but imagine if you had a program with several lines and you wanted to stop it at a particular line to see what the values are as you move on. By doing this, you can track down exactly where the mistake may have occurred. Also, if you notice right here, it shows you that even though you put in 5, in the text box that's seen as the string 5. And this is why we need our conversion functions to actually convert these to numerical values. Now that I've seen what the problem is, I'm going to stop this debugging process, remove my breakpoint, and fix the logical error. Now that I've done that, I'm ready to run the program again. And again, I type in the same values just to make sure, and I did get exactly what I was looking for. This is how to run a program in Visual Basic. Now again, to close this file, I want to make sure it's saved. If I don't see any little star there, asterisk next to it, I know it's saved. If I put any little thing in there, that star shows up again, I know I need to save it. I do not want to save it by going to the file menu and choosing any of these options. Instead, I want to click on the Save All button. Once I click on the Save All button, the stars go away. Now, one thing that you're going to be doing for your programs as you move along is you're going to be documenting your programs. In class, I talked about putting the apostrophe and then putting any additional information that may go in your program. Later on, we'll talk about commenting each section. For instance, we have the declaration section. We have the input section. We have the processing section. And finally, we have output. Now again, I'm not a stickler for putting section on each one of them, but at least you can designate what each section represents. Okay, again, notice I've made some changes, so the star is back there again. I'll click Save All, and the program is saved. To close this up, I can simply close it up. Once I close it up, to open it again, I click on the SLN file, or the one with the infinity. The SLN file is the way I reopen my project. I don't want to click on anything else here. Again, once I reopen my project, if I open it up and the project is not showing here, I'll simply double click on the Form 1 to get that project up and running. This is how to create a small project, and as we move along, we'll create more sophisticated ones.